Welcome back. This is another episode of Tactical Enlightenment. This YouTube channel is dedicated to helping players improve their field command through the use of superior tactics in Bannerlord. Bannerlord, a pretty amazing game. Once you understand the field command concepts, once you get better at controlling your troops, there's a lot of tactical uses for your troops that many players don't really consider until they get more experienced. This channel is specifically designed to help those players. In this episode, we'll have a battle, but I'm also going to cover troop composition within your own army group. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I form my own army group, what units I prefer, and then also the nobles. People know that I have many nobles in my main army group. 428 troops. I have almost 200 archers, right? I do tend to lean towards archers. A lot of times my strategy is to use that archer as the main firepower source, and then I have all of these high-level lords. I'll go through a handful of them here. A lot of these are family members. You can see they're brothers and cousins and fathers of the original character, and they've at this stage have had sons and daughters of their own, so that our army group is I think it's 40 or 50 actual nobles in the army group, right? And obviously that's advantageous because they can have custom armor, custom weapons. You can spec out their skills like this to be very strong, very specifically suited, right? Most of them have high athleticism, strong melee skills. They throw javelins like Olympic athletes, right? This is a really good archer, for example. You can see the extended family here. There's Gregor, and I think he had like 4 or 5 wives and created all these children that then go out and dominate in battle. I encourage you to build a division like this. All of these family members get stuck in our 8th Corps. So you have all these characters with 330 athletics and 330 crossbow skills and 316 archery skills. Really powerful lords, and it may take you a while to develop your characters to this point, but even early on, if you have 8, 9, 10, 12 people in your group, I would encourage you to have this type of reserve / elite unit, right? Some of them are hired companions, right? The wanderers. This person was hired on 300 skill and a couple other stats, right? Anyway, so I have all of these lords. And those people really anchor the 8th Corps. As for regular troops, again, I tend to lead towards archers. So Britannian Fiend champions. I capture these anytime there are prisoners and try to recruit them. Anytime I have the ability to recruit the lower level tiered troops that eventually get promoted to this stage, I do so, right? So your Britannian Fiend champs is at the bottom of the chart. And as they get promoted up the ranks, right, they get stronger and stronger, eventually reaching this stage where they have 2 different quivers of stacked bodkin arrows. So that's 64 arrows that they're shooting with very nasty skill, and that's one of the main anchors of my armies, right? I only have 17 in this particular army group, but in some battles between all of our lords, we might have 100. Excuse me, we might have 100 or 200 on the battlefield at the same time. So Britannian Fiend Champ should be something that you're seeking to add. The other noble troops, of course, are powerful. They're all cavalry units, but I typically only have a couple of each, just because they're quite honestly very difficult to obtain, right? They get killed a lot. But again, your promotionary process, there's a great benefit to understanding that. If you know that these troops come from lower level troops, then you can put some of those lower level noble troops in your army, like this Britannian Fiend. Eventually they'll promote to a Fiend champion, right? The Britannian Fiend themselves are very capable, but eventually they'll become even stronger, right? So other archer groups I like the elite hired crossbow, really high crossbow skills, right? Also pretty decent melee skills. These units are more than capable on their own. The veteran sword sister, of course, the same thing. She's both very capable at melee herself, and also devastating, in battle with shield and sword. Right? It's very nice to have multi-purpose archer units. Towards the bottom of my army group, a lot of people are surprised to see a bunch of these low-ranking troops, and there's a really good reason for that, right? Your upper-ranked troops come from these lower-ranked troops, right? Your Britannian highborn youth. These guys, as they survive and gain experience, will ultimately become a Britannian Fiend champion. And so what I like to do is I like to keep sort of a succession wave of these troops. Britannian hero, sword sisters. These are the sort of middle tiers that eventually will promote to your Fiend champions, right? So I try to keep a bunch of the lower ranking ones in my army at the same time, and what happens is because the rest of the army is so strong, these troops can kind of stay at the rear of the battle, gain some slow experience, before they're ready to join the ranks of the elite troops, right? So that's a little bit of a walkthrough through the army. Hopefully that was satisfactory for enough players. I can cover this part too, the unit spawn prioritization. This is under your gameplay options. You can basically set it whether or not you start with elite troops at the beginning of the battle, or a mix, or weak troops. And I don't encourage you to do anything other than elite troops. And the reason is this: if the enemy comes into battle with their elite troops and you start battle with your weakest troops down here, you're going to have a much harder time. You're going to get decimated at the beginning of the battle. And sure, you'll bring in your elite troops after that, right? After these guys are all killed off. But you want these guys promoting, right, up the chain to the Sturgian heavy spearmen. You don't want them getting killed and smoked early in the battle, right? You want your hardcore troops fighting theirs, right? Like, this is one of my favorite infantry, the Sturgian heavy spearmen. Very strong army. I mean, he's wearing like as strong as armor almost as the lords, right? That's top tier armor, a top tier helmet. Like, this is a very tough infantry. You want these guys meeting the enemy vanguard. That way you have a better chance of winning that first wave, and more importantly, your lower level mid-tier troops aren't getting killed right away in battle, right? So I will cover a few more of my infantry. You can see like his athletics and his one-handed skills are very high. A few of the others that I tend to like, let's see here. I do like javelin throwing. I tend to emphasize shield and javelin throwers, like this Battanian wildling, right? They have two different quivers, so to speak, stack amount of hooked javelins. So they're good at throwing these projectiles. They've got good armor. They've got a nice shield and a sword. But the key is that they throw javelins. You notice a lot of my battles, I'm leaning heavily on my 6th division, which is my javelin/skirmishers. Look at his throwing skill, right? 130. He's highly athletic. He's wearing good armor, and he's no slouch in melee combat as well. I do like what are called shock troops, right? This is another skirmisher, the veteran skirmisher. That's just a lower level wildling. The shock troops is defined as all the units that have a single. One more to mention: the late rat wrecker. These guys also have 2 quivers of javelins, very powerful to put in your skirmishers. So your shock troops are very beneficial as well, but you have to be careful with them. Your shock troops, your Oathsworn is more of a standard melee with the shield. Your shock troops, though, those are the ones that have like your Manavliatons and stuff like that. Sturgian Heavy Axeman's another guy. I don't like these guys as much because they have axes. I definitely prefer javelins over axes. But you need your shock troops as well. You need some amount of shock troops, guys with two-handed weapons, to sort of augment these other types of melee units. You see the comparison again, the wildling. The reason I like them is they're throwing javelins instead of axes. This is much stronger than the axes. Unfortunately, unless axes get adjusted, they're just not very useful in war. So I tend to favor javelin throwers. I tend to favor shields. I tend to favor archers. And then you're gonna have some shock troops no matter what. But I try to mix them in. Again, the progression of these guys in the middle, the Battanian heroes, your sword sisters, these are your tier 3, tier 4 units that you need to upgrade eventually to Battanian Fiends, and then eventually to Battanian Fiend champions, right? You really want to have sort of your future stars of the army leveling up as you're winning battles, right? So again, I always keep some low-level troops, right? I think that's essential because you want to have these guys promoting. It does make your army a little bit weaker battle by battle, but it doesn't matter anything if you're going to win one battle and lose the war, right? So here we go, almost 1,500 aserai. Looking at their troops, they don't have top tier troops. That's why, it shows that the battle, they're only slightly favored. You would think an enemy with nearly twice our number would be hugely favored over us. Again, she's got 107 trained infantrymen. These are mediocre tier 4 troops, tier 3 troops. So that's part of the reason it shows that we have not quite a 50% chance of winning this. We'll play with normal player damage. And in this battle, hopefully I can show you some tactics involved in using these troops that I just showed you. Add another noble to my 8th corps. You can see my 6th corps over there. We'll adjust the cavalry a little bit. My 3rd cavalry tends to be my shield blocking wall, while my 2nd cavalry is my mobile wall. So one thing we know is the aserai horses are almost always going to come in on the left flank. There is variation, but it's rare. If you know the enemy's going to come and pursue a certain type of tactic, you're more readily able to counter that tactic, right? So I'm setting up my main infantry vanguard. I want there to be a little bit more in the main vanguard than there are skirmishers, right? So I'll lower the skirmisher number down. That main vanguard, that's going to be our shield wall at the front. They're the ones really absorbing the enemy main attack. And what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to roll up this left side, stay to the high ground there. Oh, I want to show you this locking process too. You can lock off the units that are in your individual army groups. That way when you move your slider, it doesn't steal from those troops, right? If your sliders are moving and they're not locked, it will actually pull those troops, from other army groups. So you can see how I'm going to typically lay out my 6th corps, right? This death zone between the 1st and the 6th. Now, when I'm on a hill, like coming up, I won't have them set up on the right flank. I'll typically have them set up on the left flank, right? I want them elevated. I want the enemy kind of coming down into a bowl where my troops are sort of surrounding their main vanguard. Right, so we're going to try to capture. Wow, they're really far away. Those numbers there, that's distance. The bottom number, the top number is how many troops are in each army group of the enemy, and the bottom number is distance. I think of these as like a yard distance. So the enemy is like a half a mile away, right? We're going to have to actually march for a while just to arrive at where the enemy is. As you can see, we're outnumbered about 2 to 1, and that means that we get less troops on the field, at the beginning and throughout the battle than the enemy does. They have 600 and something, and we have under 400. So not in too big of a hurry here. I don't want to race ahead with my cavalry, get overextended and have my units sort of fighting, piecemeal. We're going to concentrate our forces. We're going to stay along this top ridge. And again, that serves 2 main purposes. The first purpose is that it cuts off the aserai horse archers from really getting around our left flank. In real life, this would be a thing. Now, of course, in real life, the human opponent, the real strategist on the other side, would simply come on your right flank. But we do have the elevation, and they would that's a benefit whether it's real life or not, right? So in this case, I'm trying to zoom in so you can see all I'm doing is putting my cavalry out and shield line walls, and the sole purpose of that at this stage is to deter the enemy. I don't want them pouring in here and making aggressive attacks. Our horse archers are back here shooting. I'm going to use a lot of slow-mo in this battle. I haven't done this a lot. For fans of action, this battle might be frustrating to watch, and that's fine. I've got 80 other battles where there's fast-paced action. But this is going to be a lot more of an instructional video in sort of real time. I'm going to use the pause feature where you select a unit, and as long as you have the option selected, it slows down the battle, I think, by 75%. So the enemy seems like they are congregating up on a higher ridge, almost trying to do what we're trying to do. They're trying to gain high ground. They want to use elevation to their advantage, which is a good strategy. This is one of the few times that the artificial intelligence is actually making a very high IQ move, right? Even though they outnumber us, they recognize the power of our army, and they're taking a defensive stance, right? It might be because we cut off their flank here, and it also might be that there's some variability with the AI. So our troops are starting to catch up now, and we do a little bit of reconnaissance. I've got some units frozen there, and all I'm doing right now is trying to figure out what I'm up against. I almost lost my horse instantly right there. 297 damage to my horse. Look at this, got a sliver of life. I don't wear heavy armor on my horse. I want to move faster, right? I have a lighter armor so that my horse can travel faster, and sometimes that happens. Right? It didn't die, but it got dropped. Fortunately, I'm good at carjackings, right? Give me your horse, dude. Just take that guy's horse. Try to get out of here before I get assaulted. Too bad they got like 500 javelin throwers attacking me. Look at all the javelins raining down. I wish I could just bag them all up to throw them back at the enemy. Alright, so my forces are starting to move up. Oops, I've got one unit on drag here. It looks like I sort of carelessly had my 8th division following. You're going to make mistakes. I make mistakes. There aren't too many people that are perfect every battle, right? Maybe Napoleon. All right, so we're advancing our troops here. Now I've got a little reconnaissance of where the enemy is, right? They're way up on that ridge. Now I've got to come up with a tactic to defeat their tactic, their strategy. And what we're going to try to do here is we're going to try to use shield walls as distractionary processes, and then set our troops up right behind them before clearing them out, so that we'll have a clean line of sight to shoot at them. One advantage I see that I have over them already is I have better line of sight, and their units are a little compacted, right? You want your shooting units to be spread out, right? So I'm sending the 8th Corps up here. I'm sending up my horse archers in a line. I'm sending up my 4th and 5th archers. And what we're going to effectively try to do is shoot them off their ridge, right? Over there, I'm setting up cavalry in a shield wall. That's the 2nd Cavalry. And the 3rd Cavalry down there. And what I'm doing with that is I'm trying to create a safe corridor for my troops so that they can get in here and get into position, right? If the enemy is just rampaging with cavalry, like I see quite a few cavalry right now, they're not going to be able to get into position. The screen is all green right now because the enemy's kind of trapped up on that hill, and our archers are starting to go to work. They're getting some kills, right? But it's a very, very positive kill ratio. Now you can see the big disadvantage with their strategy is they're packed in up there, right? They are throwing javelins, they are shooting, but because we're spread out and we're shooting, they have a much wider area, or much rather more obvious area where our archers and javelin throwers can make contact with targets, right? They can just sort of randomly fire projectiles up there, and they're going to make a lot of contact with their troops, right? Again, my cavalry wall is just down there, just holding back the enemy cavalry. I just want them in defensive lines. Moving the 6th Infantry forward, right? All I want them is a little bit closer to fire javelins up in there. This is basically a ranged war at this stage, right? They're trying to stay up on their high ground. They've got cavalry skirmishing. We're intercepting their cavalry and giving them hell on the projectile side, right? On the ranged side. You know, because of my army walkthrough, that I tend to favor ranged units, right? That means I have ranged cavalry. That means I have lots of ranged infantry. A lot of those javelin throwers are doing some good work here. Because a lot of those guys have shields, they're absorbing the enemy blows here, right? I see javelins pouring in, but a lot of our guys have their shields up, right? They hold their shield up till they throw their javelin, and it's very effective. Meanwhile, towards the back, hey, let's dump this horse. I need a shield. Come in there. Man, sometimes your guys just like get in your way. Out of my way, fellas. I want this fucking shield. How frustrating. Sometimes you know, your guys will be in the back there just raining damage on them. I really wanted that shield. So you see my guys are shooting up there. They're shooting down on us. But because we have superior ranged units in this case, we're at least going to have like a 50-50 kind of battle here, and probably a better. You see how packed they are and up there. And besides our infantry down here, which are very tightly packed, everybody else is spread, right? So a lot of their projectiles are hitting the ground, and there's two benefits to that. The first, of course, is it's not hitting your troops, right? You're not taking damage from these javelins raining down. The second is your units will readily pick up javelins, arrows, crossbow bolts, and that allows them to continue to throw more and more bolts, right? So now the infantry of the enemy is pouring down, so I'm actually breaking my cavalry off to the side, because what we're going to do with those cavalry is we're going to use them to attack the flank of this incoming infantry. Right? I'm doing a lot of close-up views here in slow-mo. Now that their infantry is sort of right in front of us, I'm going to bring our cavalry back and have them charge. Right? They are now charging the rear of the enemy infantry. Right? I'm still holding this firm shield wall line right in front of me where I'm giving commands. I've taken some javelins in the face just standing here, but I wanted to show this battle mostly from the side of command. Now I've got the 8th, 1st, and 6th Infantry, and what we're going to do is basically move them in and collapse on this enemy force, right? They've got cavalry pouring in from behind them now, right? They're still getting rained on by projectiles from the archers above. And now I have 3 different infantry divisions, including elite troops, fresh out of ammunition, right? Now they've whipped out their swords, and they're pouring in on this trapped, almost a kill box scenario for the enemy infantry, right? It's a steamroller. Look at them just pile in. The enemy has a weak archer wave up there, but that's not going to do very much. I'm going to run a lot of this in slow-mo. We're just going to have like a Matrix-style massacre here. That way I can try to show you this process as much as possible. Now, 2 of those units, the 6th and the 1st, I told them to move forward, strictly move forward. So they almost move forward like a linebacker in football. They just push forward. They'll actually push past the enemy. You can see some of my troops are actually now turning around to face the enemy that they've passed. Well, the reason I'm doing that is because the 8th Corps is moving in behind that mass, and they are in charge. So any of these enemy forces that are sort of caught between my 1st and 6th Infantry and the 8th are then totally pinchered, right? They have guys on all sides. The infantry's rolling them up. The archers are still keeping the enemy archers at bay up there, but my infantry is just completely massacring their infantry, right? Their infantry already got damaged heavily by projectiles, then the cavalry charge, now an infantry wave, just totally sandwiching and massacring their main vanguard. Right, and again, we're outnumbered, right? So in most of these instances, we're attacking 150 troops with 100, or maybe even 80. But the effectiveness of that pincher trap right there was devastating. So another wave is coming. We're going to do plenty of slow-mo here. The archers are still exchanging arrows with the enemy, but I sent my cavalry up them to harass them as well. There were so many things going on, I didn't have time to mention that. So the cavalry's up there harassing the enemy archers, and they're being shot to pieces by Battanium Fiend champs and other elite archery units. And you can see the result, right? It's just dead archers as far as the eye can see. So I'm moving my 8th Corps down. We're going to reposition for this next wave of enemy. This is the 1st Corps. Because I'm moving the archers over to this higher spot, the infantry line is being set in a new line. It's a new angle, if you can see. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want that infantry between the enemy and my archers. I want to put my archers up on this high ground. You can see my cavalry are still up there cleaning up their archers. There's a few left, but it's basically they're all annihilated. I just told them to charge again, right? So what I'm going to do, I have this 1st infantry line. They just came through my position there in slow-mo. They're still in shield wall. They're still holding ground there. And I'm moving my archers. I'm centering my archers above the enemy here. You can see my javelin throwers are still just firing away, right? They're laying waste to these cavalry that come around the edge here. And these are now their middle tier cavalry. They don't have much chance against elite units like my 6th and 8th. You see these guys? They're trying to throw javelins. It's kind of fun in slow-mo. You can see even the mistakes, right? He got knocked around by a horse there while he's trying to throw his javelin. But the key strategically is we have our cavalry in a line down here, we have our infantry in a line down here, and positioned above them, just ready to rain death, are archers, 2 different groups of archers, and the 6th and 8th groups. What's this fucking lord over here? In slow-mo, it's a little bit cheating. Like, you can see everything going on, almost like Neo in the Matrix, where, oh, there's an arrow coming in here, let me just dodge to the left. I think I'm going to try to take this guy out in slow-mo. So you can't actually attack in slow-mo, but you can, once you've thrown it, then you can go to slow-mo. God, he just hit me in the chest with an arrow. Alright, take this guy out. It's much harder to do like in slow-mo. I'd probably have a much better chance in normal. Alright, a javelin to the neck. Alright, so slowing it down again. Here comes the enemy infantry. Again, it's middle tier troops, so they're already in trouble, right? If I just did F1, F3 charge, we would still win this battle. But to be, again, a little bit more surgical, a little bit more tactically perfect here in this situation, we're going to send cavalry around to the right. We're going to send the 8th Corps right into their midst, right? This enemy force is going to bang up against the 1st Infantry that's in shield wall, and then I'm going to send in my 2 different elite groups, the 6th and the 8th, sort of as shock troops, right? Some of them have ranged, like I saw a crossbow unit there. I will tell them to charge as soon as they're within the enemy midst, right? You can see them charging right amongst the enemy, and I'm doing that because I want them to wreak havoc with the enemy archers and javelin throwers, right? The 1st Infantry is sort of steamrolling down. Now they're in charge. The 6th unit, which is this skirmisher unit, I'm just advancing them. Now I've got them in charge, right? And they're buckling in and angling in on enemy forces. And meanwhile, the 8th Corps that I moved in manually here, they're all the way over to me now. And now they are in charge as well. Right? Much easier to dodge a horse in slow-mo. So I've given the 8th unit charge too. And again, in slow-mo, now you have 2 different elite units moving in at the same time as an infantry unit. Here comes another wave. You know, again, when you're outnumbered, you know you're going to face enemy wave after wave. But again, this current wave is almost completely dissolved. This guy's going to chase me in slow-mo. Kill him. Never had a battle actually like this before. I probably should have, just to experiment. In total slow-mo, like the whole battle. You can see almost every blow people are giving each other. Now, a lot of the archers at this stage, when you look at them in slow-mo, they're just holding shields. That means they're out of ammunition. Now, remember I told you earlier that a lot of these are very capable melee units, right? Especially Battanian Fianchamps, veteran Sword Sisters. They're almost elite infantry units. So, what we're going to do with them is they charge, right? They're now going to join the fray. We want as many different swords in the face of the enemy as possible. Any little gap where either my units get killed or there's a gap for these to pour in. These archers now barreling down the hill, fresh out of ammunition, but most of them are unwounded, right? I don't see any blood on them. There's no arrows on them. Most of these units will now fly into combat, and look at the back there. The ones that still have arrows, they will keep shooting. So archers on charge does not mean that they all drop their weapons and charge. It means that if they're close to the enemy or out of ammunition, they will charge. And if they're towards the back and have ammunition, they will continue to shoot. It's a nice little niche. It's a nice little design of the AI. Incidentally, if you do want your archers to all charge, even if they have ammunition, tell them to hold fire. And I believe the command for that is strictly F4. There's no precursor to that. You just do F4. Have them hold fire and then charge. And then all those units, even if they have ammunition, Battanian Fianchamps, etc., will charge. Then at some point later in the battle, you can tell them to open fire again, and they will have those arrows in reserve. It's a nice little tip for for somebody who hasn't done that before. So again, elevation is playing into this battle. We're coming down this hill, and if you don't know, Bannerlord has a very strong physics engine related to combat. The faster you are moving, the more damage you do. Now conversely, the slower you are moving, the less damage you do. So this enemy force was running uphill. That means they're moving slow. That means any strikes they make, and we can do some more matrix dodging here. This guy with he's got like a little machinist's hammer coming after me. You know, the slower your enemy moves, I can just easily dodge every single blow too. He's just haplessly swinging this little judge's gavel at me. Oh, he got a hit. The slower your enemy is moving in on you, right? That means that they're going to do less damage coming up the hill. They're also moving slower. Meanwhile, your guys are coming down the hill, moving faster, and hence they do even more damage, right? So the advantages to elevation aren't just range and archery and command. It's many-folded. You always want the high ground, right? And this is a true war axiom in real life too. Very, very few situations where the enemy, or rather where oppositions in a war, intentionally chose to be in the low ground situation, right? So my force is now charging down this hill. We've got all the momentum. And the enemy, of course, like I said, at this stage they got blacksmiths. They got guys these guys are normally like behind the plow with the oxen, and they're facing still elite units. Because we devastated their vanguard, there's another high-level companion of mine. They are now facing, you know, Napoleon's old guard, like the most savage part of our army, right? And the enemy, they're actually getting a few more kills than I suspected they would, probably because we're outnumbered so much. But it's still ultimately, this is a no-win situation for the enemy, right? I see a little bit of what the problem is. You see this little ridge here to the left? That's preventing a lot of my ranged units from firing. They had to get over the top of that before they could actually shoot. And that's something to keep in mind with your archers, right? If you want to have sort of perfect tactics, so to speak, or enable every single advantage you can, you need to be aware of all these little things, right? In slow-mo, it's not as easy for me to sort of watch over the battlefield here. I'm actually enjoying just watching the fight kind of up close in slow-mo. So I think that's a pretty good picture for most people. I'm going to speed it up here a little bit towards the end of the battle. In this episode, you know, hopefully that gives people a better understanding of how I choose to make my army. Also, I think hopefully that helps to give people a little bit closer, slower view of tactics, right? A little modified kill box at the beginning. Obviously, a huge tactic is always controlling the high ground, concentrated firepower, using your shield walls to advance your troops, right? It's very powerful. You know, and then cutting your way through troops, right? Going downhill, fighting with numbers, getting distracted here at the end of battle. I guess it's better than having your head cut off. That guy was distracted and lost a head. So hopefully this episode was beneficial, people. If you want to see more slow motion battles like this, I'm willing to do this for another battle or two for scenarios where there's a lot going on and maybe it's more than people can keep track of. Just say so in the comments box. Otherwise, if you have any questions about the army build out, the army layout, I'm always happy to answer questions. The channel continues to grow. We're kicking almost 1,000 subscribers, and I think the more subscribers we get, the more the community will be able to learn from each other. You see in this battle we lost under 200 and killed 1,500. To be perfectly honest, that's sort of a mediocre result. A lot of times with superior tactics I achieve an even better ratio than that. Okay, so look at the Battanian Fiend Champs. I want to show you this part too. These guys upgraded. Do you see that thing where there's two arrows pointing up where it says 22? That means 22 of those Battanian heroes that survived this battle are now Battanian Fiends. And on the Fiends side, 7 of the Battanian Fiends upgraded to Battanian Fiend Champions. So earlier I was mentioning, right, how troops upgrade. This is a critical thing for you to understand and employ in your own armies. Right? Now it'll do so whether you think about it or not, but I think you should be actively strategizing this part of the game. Right? Well, thanks again for watching. Again, please subscribe to the channel, make as many comments, questions, etc. that you'd like to. And I'll see you fellas next time. Thanks for watching.